Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the February 4th meeting of the Hamilton Planning Board. It's about 7 o'clock. Tonight we have on our agenda, the Bancroft Way residents are looking to have their road accepted as a town way. We have a review of open space and farmland preservation bylaw and other various bylaws we'll be talking about as well. And we need to potentially re-vote on the housing production plan that we voted on a number of weeks ago, and then other board business and minutes. So first on the agenda is Bancroft Way. I don't know who is representing the residents.
I am.
So Patrick, you want to bring us up to date real quick on where we are and
Sure.
Kind of why we're here?
We have received a request from Susan Morgan and some of the abutters from Bancroft Way. As the board and the town is aware, we have an existing roadway acceptance policy. Long story short, that policy is basically that the residents provide 50% of the funds to upgrade a roadway, and the town provides the remaining 50% to take a roadway which was originally constructed to be not fully acceptable dimensionally or otherwise, and was permitted in the original definitive subdivision permit in a way that was somewhat less than typical. That request is being made now to the planning board by the residents who live along Bancroft Way. They have provided a letter to me that they have signed that they want to pursue this with the town. I have made Susan Morgan, their representative, aware that the planning board has, in fact, endorsed and voted for a new policy and recommended that to the Board of Selectmen, that new policy has the residents making 100% of the constructed improvements on their own. So that's kind of where we're at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Patrick, I was on the board originally for this subdivision, and I remember having the discussion numerous times with the residents and making them fully aware that if they built, a small, narrow road and didn't meet subdivision standards, that they would have to, treat it as a private road and wouldn't be subject to plowing and other kinds of town services. And at that time, they were all on board with that and chose that as the route to go, as opposed to upgrading the whole driveway to meet town standards. So I guess...
was that was the developer at the time, right? Not necessarily residents?
There were already...
I don't remember, I don't know.
I think there were a couple of residents already had built houses there, and so it wasn't just a developer. It was a couple of, there were a couple of residents already there.
Can I ask a question of them before they start, please? This is not, it's pertinent, but it's only pertinent in the sense that I want to make sure I know which street it is. Because I think I know, but I didn't get a chance to look. Okay.
Susan, if you, well, actually, can you just go up to the microphone?
Okay.
Thank you. There's an echo.
Okay. Go ahead and introduce yourself, and then I'll ask you my question.
All right,
and then
thank
you.
you.
Can go from there.
I'm Susan Morgan. We live at 1 Bancroft Way. My husband, Dick. I'm here representing all 4 homes on Bancroft Way. Franklin Foster in number 5, Ann and Steve Moylan, who are in number 2, and Beth McLeod is here. She's number 4. Her husband, Leo, is en route, hopefully. But just so you know, we do have 100% consensus at this point, and to just comment back on William's point, back in 86 to 92, I think there were only 2 residents on that road.
Yeah, 2.
And they are no longer there.
Okay, Richard, do you want to just ask your
Yeah,
question real quick?
Bancroft Way, I know which direction it goes. If you're going from Bay Road down, it's on the right-hand side. It's a very short, steep,
Oh, it's off Gardner
is
Street.
that correct?
Off Gardner Street?
It's off
Gardner,
Gardner
yeah.
Street.
Yes.
Okay. And then there's just 4 houses. Okay, fine, I know where it is.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I have been designated to represent everyone, but just to be clear, we are all in consensus, and I'm hopefully going to represent all of our comments that we've discussed over the past few weeks or months. If anything escapes me, please don't hesitate to jump in, if that's okay. So you have received the petition from our residents, 100% of our signatures. We're aware of the standing road acceptance procedures from '99 and understand that Bancroft Way was included in this procedure document and is eligible under the category of private ways whose developer was granted significant waivers in order to be constructed at a lesser cost to the developer. That's the category that is at the top of that list with all of those road names. There are a few important issues for you to consider that we think would provide a public benefit to the town because of the unique characteristics of the approved road construction and the effects of that over time. It's our hope that we can request the assistance of the town to help resolve the issues within the process of accepting the road as a public way. The first that I'd like to make you all aware of is a safety issue, and that's regarding the entrance grade. As built and approved, is dangerous when exiting onto Gardner Street, especially in snow or icy conditions. We are overly cautious, and thankfully to date there's not been a problem, but we are concerned that one of us or someone less familiar with the grade could slide out onto Gardner Street directly into traffic. Some of us have experienced times when we can't stop when exiting, and fortunately there's not been an oncoming vehicle. But we're concerned that someone less familiar with the road will have an incident that could be a potential liability for the town should an accident actually occur there as a result of the grade. It's our perception that the entrance has been eroding over time and in fact getting more depressed at the dip where it joins with Gardner Street. We've been here since 1992 and can confirm that cars and trucks did not bottom out the way they do today at the entrance grade. So we believe the cause of the erosion is likely due to both water and gravel runoff down Gardner Street. It's a significant hill as you're approaching our street. And there is, if you notice on the side, there's a lot of gravel that's eroded off of the 79 Gardner Street, causing sort of an embankment. So we just see gravel and asphalt and water runoff constantly down at the base of our road. In addition, the asphalt is deteriorating because of the frequent issues that trucks and plows have when navigating. So anytime that a truck bottoms out or a plow blade picks up a piece of loose asphalt, it's causing deterioration at the grade. So I just note that in the recorded planning board decision letter from 1986, there was a request for 6 copies of the entire subdivision plan set as recorded, so that we could actually determine what the grade was supposed to be and what the elevations are supposed to be. Patrick has not been able to locate a copy. He indicated he will continue to look. Also in the planning board subdivision approval letter, we note there's a handwritten note indicating the entrance grade was installed wrong, that it's too steep. I don't know how that was determined. It basically means that it was out of compliance with what was originally approved, if that's the case. But we'd have questions about what happened, how was it determined, who was responsible for following up on that, if that was in fact an issue. And in my conversation with Patrick, we talked about an as-built plan that would be helpful also to be able to determine what was approved and what was actually built. But it would also help us determine how the elevations may have changed over the course of time due to any erosion and settling issues. So I know that there are 2 members on this board who were signing on in 1986, and I wondered if either of you have recollections of seeing a completed set of plans, including the elevations for Bancroft Way, that we can't seem to find.
I can say that I can search at home, but I have no idea. I don't usually keep all my records. So
It just said,
happened.
it seemed like one set was required for each office, the DPW and the Board of Health and Planning Board. Everybody needed to have a copy on file. Now none could be found.
There's nothing at the registry either? Typically, that gets filed at the Registry of Deeds. They should have something. Have you looked there, or?
The only recorded thing that I've found at the registry is that one page map that does not have any elevations.
Yeah, I've had staff look. That's what she saw.
Yeah,
But that's really not relevant to your request, though, is it?
it is.
Why?
That's the major basis of our request, is that we feel like we have a safety issue that needs to be addressed and should be addressed jointly with the town.
Is that why you're requesting the town pay 50% of the cost of the road?
Well, I think that it would be in the town's best interest to work with us to resolve the safety issue.
I just want to, you got to put that aside because the records don't exist. So you've got a safety issue that you want to address, but you really want the town to take over the road.
Ultimately, yes.
Yeah, I mean, that's where we're
We
going.
should be able to make lemonade out of lemons if there's a bad situation that we could make better
So
and improve the town.
have you done any kind of cost estimates? Got any engineering analysis done on the property?
We have not, we don't know what was supposed to have been built that would have been deemed safe.
Yeah, but right now, I don't want you to think I'm being rude. We don't know that, and we can't determine that because the records don't exist. So let's start where we are now and figure out how to move forward. Would that make sense?
Well, I'm looking for direction from the planning board as to what you would
I just want-
request of us.
Right, I just want clarity from you is, since all that documentation doesn't exist, we really can't address it because we don't know what was intended and we don't know what was the standard to which it was built. So here we are today with the residents of Bancroft Way wanting the town to take over maintenance of and plowing and et cetera, right?
Well, I
If you wanna get up there,
agree
talk up there.
that would be the outcome if we are to undertake a major repair and regrading of the road, that we could also establish what road acceptance requirements the town would need.
Well, okay, no, that helps in terms of clarification. So now I'd like to ask a question of Patrick. If the town does adopt a roadway, does it re-engineer the roadway, or is it just accepting the road and bringing it up to a standard of I guess it would be a subdivision roadway?
The way that this policy works is it first evaluates the roadway in its present condition. It makes a determination as to, what changes, what upgrades are necessary between the existing and what were the original requirements as part of the subdivision regs at the time that it was constructed. So that delta, if you will, has to be ascertained. Once that's finally done, let's say the town agrees to do it, the town and the property owners split the cost of the engineering.
Right.
And afterwards, the construction. I think one of the important things to consider in the decision is it does provide a bit of a roadmap. In the next to last paragraph on the first page of the decision, it basically says that, as Bancroft Way is to remain a private way, the planning board has reduced the right-of-way from 40 or to 40 feet, which is 10 foot less than the required 50-foot width for an accepted public way. There shall be no submission for town acceptance unless the way is first resubmitted to the planning board as required under Mass General Law, Chapter 41, Section 81W, to upgrade the road to then applicable public roadway standards. Said upgrading at the expense of the homeowners association may include widening of the right-of-way to 50 foot, repaving to then required standards, extension of water line to each house, sidewalks, street lights, curbing, and elimination of cul-de-sac island. So, in addition to what's in the policy, the prior decision that came from the planning board in 1986, seems to be pretty clear as to what it was requiring of the property owners and of the town if it were to go forward.
My response to that is, since the road was built to the 40-foot right-of-way standards, that meant that all of the underground utilities were put on either side of the road in the right-of-way. So I question whether the planning board would recommend that we would be required to widen that right-of-way to 50 feet, which would mean moving all of the existing utilities. So
Right,
in that
there's
case, I would
definitely-
request a waiver to that specific
Yeah.
clause that was put into the decision.
There's definitely, in subdivisions that we've approved more recently and other developments, we've wanted to have less wide roads than what were required at the time of 32 feet, which is ridiculous for a 4-house subdivision. For me, it would be more about the roadway, how the roadway was built itself, for durability reasons and so forth, to have the proper depths of subgrade and asphalt and so forth, versus widening the right-of-way, changing utilities, street lights, curbing, all that stuff, for a 4-house subdivision, right?
Right.
It'd be
I
one thing
keep
if it was
remembering what Patrick said to me when I met with him. We don't need a landing strip.
No.
We're just four homes.
Right. So, if we were to consider it, to me, that's what I'd rather focus on, is bringing the roadway up to, the durability standards that we have other roadways built to, and the safety factor, but the other stuff is, I think, kind of irrelevant in this case.
Brian, if I would tend to agree with you. The one thing that I would think needs work is that grade getting in.
Yeah.
The reason I asked is, one time I was on Gardner, I ride a motorcycle. I was on Gardner, decided to see what that street looked like, and turned on it, didn't have enough power, and almost dropped the bike. So I can attest to the fact that it is a very steep grade.
Yeah, you have to be
relative
prepared
to
for it on a
what I was
motorcycle.
expecting. So,
Yeah, that's next. That's next on
And
my,
I think it would, I think that's where the major problem is. They gotta somehow level that, make that a more gradual grade going into there. You're probably gonna have to have some side buttresses of some kind, but that's, and the other question is, how deep are the utility things under, are they underneath the road or underneath the sides of the road?
I understand that they are along the sides of the road, but the water main itself, I'm not sure. That may run down the center of the road.
But all the houses are connected to town water, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is my next point that I wanted to discuss, is that when the subdivision was approved, it was under the assumption that every lot would have private wells. So at the time of the signing, there was no water main going into Bancroft Way. So somehow, after all of that happened, the water went in, and we have one hydrant on the road that's actually installed on the right, on the property line of our abutters at 79 Gardner Street. But the water main itself dead ends because we're a cul-de-sac. So we're aware that the DPW has an interest in fixing this situation. They don't want water mains dead ending on cul-de-sacs. It creates the water stagnation, and they're thinking about how they could resolve that by looping it into, I believe, back on to Gardner Street, to loop back in so that it no longer has stagnant water. We know that it poses a potential water quality problem that we're concerned about since we're drinking the water. So I consider that another reason that the town would have an interest in helping us to upgrade the road.
Patrick, can I ask a question? We adopted back in February of last year the new road acceptance procedures.
Right.
And what's the status of those now?
That is with the Board of Selectmen.
How long have
And
they had it?
they've had it for
Since about when you.
about a year now. Yeah.
What have they been doing with it?
Are they doing a pocket veto?
So they haven't taken any action on it?
No.
So right now, the current 50% is the ruling statute?
That's the in-place policy currently.
Okay.
Has the town plowed that road in the past?
Well, that's an interesting question. The town has off and on again plowed the road. This year, they are plowing the road, which we were surprised and appreciative of, but we don't know that there's a guarantee that that will continue.
Odd.
In 2015, we were all here, and there was that big decision that was made by the Board of Selectmen that they were no longer going to be plowing private ways, no matter what petition or whatever was going on. And this year, we were told they were plowing.
Yeah. I remember that, and so I'm surprised that.
Yes, we were too, pleasantly.
You've seen the challenge of a small town as a record-keeping and consistency of policies.
I can see that.
And do you have private trash or town trash?
No, we take our trash out to the end of
Okay.
Bancroft Way. The four of us just leave everything out there.
Which makes it a real challenge getting up that road.
It can be very challenging if all of our recycling and trash barrels are out lining the
I drove up
road.
the other day with a big truck, and I was like, oh, crap.
Aha, yeah.
I'm not sure that's a technical term.
Well, I would just like to finish up by saying that these are the two primary issues that do need to be addressed as we undertake the road acceptance process with the town. We're appreciative that this 1999 procedure is available to us. And we hope that we can determine the best course of action for acceptance as we take a look at the other key areas of roadway standards that would need to be addressed. We'd also like to think that the town shares our concerns about the safety and the water issues, and will work with us to the betterment of Bancroft Way in the town. Cost sharing should be a priority for the town to help us address the issues and improvements that we've cited.
Yeah, and again, the town's priority is, right now, is not to cost share with you, and that's why we adopted those unadopted regulations to shift the burden to 100% of the homeowners.
I understand that
And-
that's the
In
process.
fact, we're probably getting into the range of tax overrides now, because our school system is asking for a 13% increase in funding. And so the town is actually in serious financial straits. So just to be clear, there's a real reluctance to adopt
Oh,
that.
I've heard that.
So
Nonetheless, we have issues that we need to have help addressing.
Well, that's, just to be clear, and it's not denying what you're saying is, the goal was to shift the entire responsibility to the homeowners, as it was originally written in the document, so, but you still have the 50% sharing as the guiding and statute that still is, so that's not a question. But just
I don't think we have any idea what the costs could be.
Right. Well, I think
So
that's
that's sort of the next
That's
step.
kind of like the next step is, that, and that's why I was asking that question is, never mind, whatever it was supposed to be, you want to get it to a certain condition now. So
Yeah.
what's the next step, Patrick, for us and for the homeowners?
I need to see if I can get these plans. I have emailed the engineering company that prepared them back in '86. Haven't received a response yet, but I need to see if we can get an as-built set of plans. I need to compare what got built with what the actual regulations were. I need to make note of that, bring that to the board. The board then has to decide, does the board want to enforce those existing standards, which is what the policy says to do, or does the board want to deviate from that for a different product? And then what is that other product? And then you go about determining the cost of that other product.
The other thing I want to find out is from Tim Olson is the whole water line issue, and if how much of a priority that is to reroute it and extend it back to Gardner Street, because that could play into this. And
I have talked to Tim about it, and he has told me that, that would be on a wish list. It's not a priority for them. They have so many larger scale priorities like rebuilding plants and that sort of thing right now that would take way greater, precedent on the limited funds that they do get.
right.
So,
But that said, if the homeowners were willing to kick in, for whatever is required, whatever we end up doing, is that something that they would want to do at that time? I'm assuming it would be, that they'd want to redo the water line at the time that all that happens.
I would only be able to make an assumption.
So for the homeowners, your next step sounds like you're going to do data collection and see if you
Right.
can determine what it was supposed to be and the as-built. Let's pretend that
Rick, could you just speak a little louder?
let's pretend you find the information that you're looking for. The next step is, then the board has to determine whether it would want to approve going forward with road acceptance
That's correct.
and to what standard.
Right.
So let's pretend we do that. What happens next in terms of getting cost estimates for the actual engineering and design? Is that something that homeowners engage, go out and hire an engineering firm, or?
That's something that we have to, at that point, have a commitment on behalf of the homeowners that they're willing to make the 50% contribution to not just the construction, but the engineering as well.
Right.
You'll see that's the number 11 in the policy document that you have in your package of the existing roadway improvement policy.
So, this question to Bancroft Way residents, I have no idea what the cost is, but it will be substantial, probably in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. So is that within your financial reality? I mean, if this costs $250,000 to do, are you willing to pony up $125,000 to $150,000 to make this happen?
From the association, I would have to confer with my residents because we really haven't talked
Well,
dollars
Right,
as
so
we've
that's
not known.
That's sort of important
Yeah.
to be thinking about because,
That expensive.
we could get all the way and then you look at the number and you go, whoa, that's not something that you as homeowners want to take on. So I just want to inject some financial considerations into.
If I might for a second, I mean, I think the role of the board should be to think carefully about what standards we want. I mean, some of these standards, like the thickness of the pavement, are pretty critical for plowing, but the right-of-way is not. As you say, we don't want a landing field for this little several hundred-foot cul-de-sac. I think if we could somehow, amongst ourselves, agree roughly what standards we would want, then they could probably call an engineer and have him estimate it, without spending thousands of dollars. It wouldn't be a firm estimate, but it would give them enough of a ballpark so they could make a decision about whether they want to go forward or not.
Yeah, that's fair.
But I think we need to decide what we would accept and what we wouldn't accept.
Okay, so the first thing that if they're going to do that, I think the big problem initially is that grade getting in.
That's a given, yeah.
That, and then the second part is to bring it up to at least a standard that it will accept easily any piece of safety equipment that needs to get up that we at least currently have or foresee in the reasonable future that allow access by the largest piece of equipment that we have.
Right.
We have had a fire truck on the cul-de-sac, I'm sorry to say, for our house a long time ago.
But
Yeah, it would just be talking to the fire chief and making sure that either what's there or what could possibly be there works for their apparatus. Obviously, I mean, there's a list of things here: sidewalks, street lights, curbing. I don't know,
I
personally.
think the curbing was waived because of the drainage effect of the way the land was
I
built.
wouldn't think that would need it. I mean, honestly, sidewalks for 4 houses doesn't seem.
Yeah, I can see
Right.
some of that not being
Seems a little
needed.
crazy to me.
Right, right.
You probably don't want street lights either, so.
I have no problem with waiving a lot of that stuff because it's just not, it's only important if somebody decides to develop beyond the fourth house, the most distant house.
That will never happen because we have a conservation restriction
So
behind.
that's good,
We're all locked in.
yeah.
Is there a cul-de-sac at the end of that road?
There is.
Yeah.
So the cul-de-sac also serves the purpose for drainage. It's,
Is it
does
graded
have,
down?
it's graded down. So it takes the pressure off the catch basins that are around the circle that accept all the other side rainwater.
So, I mean,
I think it's relatively
so-
inexpensive.
so it's bringing the grade or the
It's
subgrade and the paving up
it's the
to standard.
pavement thickness.
And the, yes, and the And the grade coming into the
grade coming in.
And the width.
With the what?
Road.
What about it?
I
How
wouldn't,
wi- how wide- how wide
I
is it?
wouldn't be in favor of
I
a
wouldn't
30
widen- I wouldn't widen that.
32-foot road.
No,
no
yeah.
way.
They're rarely, if ever, going to have
No.
two cars opposing. And if they do, one of them can wait.
Was it 20 right now?
It says in
Say
the
what?
plan that it's 20, but we measured and we found 25 to 26 feet is the actual paved width most of the way around, even on the
Yeah.
cul-de-sac.
I think the only way that the width would come into play is if one of the safety vehicles couldn't make it because it wasn't wide enough.
Yeah.
But
Well, if it's,
that's-
if it's 24
5,
or 5,
6.
it's, yeah.
Its
That's all they-
width
that's all they
is
want, yeah.
definitely adequate.
Yeah.
All right, so I think your suggestion is a good one, you know, talk to an engineer and, you know, get a sense of what engineering costs would be to correct the grade issue and to engineer the grade and the surface, and then also potential costs for construction, I guess.
Is there any curbing there at all? Not even triangular asphalt curbing?
No.
None at all, okay.
But I think, I've heard two people mention that the grade may need to have some retaining walls put on the sides,
That would be in order to get.
just at the entrance.
What you basically need to do is lengthen the grade going into the development. So that
Yes.
means that there's going to be ground here, and you're going to have to carve out ground to get the grade a more gentle rise.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
what I was talking about.
Yeah,
And you're going to need retaining walls on the side
Yeah.
of some kind.
Yeah.
Or you're going to have to grade that land so that it doesn't
Right.
pour water down into the drive.
so there will be, the 2 catch basins will be involved in that grade change, as they're currently just before the lip of the hill as you enter up.
Does that seem fair? The next step?
I would probably look for recommendations for engineering firm. We would prefer to be working with a firm the town is familiar with for projects.
Patrick?
That's Patrick.
Yeah, the next step is I need to prepare a report that gives us, you know, some data and some measurement kinds of things. You know, I'll have the DPW director go out there with me and look at some things as well. That report I'll bring back to this board and I'll supply to the residents as well. And then the planning board can decide where you want to go from the findings that I have.
But before any of this gets accepted, it has to be accepted at town meeting, right?
That's what I was
Oh,
just
yeah.
gonna say, yeah.
So, I mean, you have a.
The Board of
There-
Selectmen,
We,
Oh,
Unless they
Battle.
unless they pack the meeting.
Yeah, I'll show up to the meeting, it should be fine.
Huh?
well, the DPW director has to accept it, and town meeting, and us.
right,
But the meeting, according to the, whatever bylaw we're working on now.
right, in
is the
that,
last.
an article has to go through the Board of Selectmen in order to get to town meeting. There's that procedure as well, so they're effectively a permit granting body to this as well.
So the current law is 50/50.
Yes,
Yeah.
I would consider that a bargain.
oh, it is.
well, that's why I've said we appreciate that this is still the procedure that's available to us now. There is nothing else on the books.
I'd take it while you can get it, because it won't last.
Right.
Well, I believe you, and
Christmas is 11 months early.
therefore, we're not opening any floodgates to other roads to want to follow in our footsteps.
Interesting choice of words. Floodgates.
Well, there hasn't been any other road going before you that's completed this process, as I understand.
Completed, no.
No, we've
Hopefully, we could be a simple road. We're just small, and it's a manageable thing to take on. And we could be setting up all of the future residents of Bancroft Way for hundreds of years to come.
That's an assertive thought, thank you.
Always end on a positive. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Hey, Brian, before we go to the next, if I may, I'd like to suggest that at some time we consider not having any roads get into that situation by not having any private ways like that in our developments. I mean, I just don't see it.
We end up bearing the burden of.
Well, it's not that, it's that, first of all, we're gonna spend a lot of time discussing this, which is, we have it, but but it's just, situations change, and I just not sure that it's the best way to go to give these developers a price break and then have
Well,
these
Richard,
come back
just-
20, 30, 40 years later.
So if the Board of Selectmen actually adopts the 100% cost, it probably won't matter.
That's true,
So,
that's quite true.
Still think Richard's point's well taken. The initial approval of a
Go
subdivision.
to the microphone. It's okay, because it's recorded and we gotta know who you are and that kind of stuff. It's important, please.
Any distraction.
Yeah, good idea.
So, I think Richard's point's well taken regardless of what happens with the 100% versus 50/50. The point being, subdevelopment, subdivisions should be approved to be town-approved roads, period. And giving a contractor a break by allowing him to develop a street that isn't to code or isn't to the norm that's required, that generally doesn't get passed on to the residents that buy the properties, believe me. And our property tax rates do not reflect that either. So I think I second your point. I think it's a
By the way, you need to introduce yourself to the.
Dick Morgan, 1 Bancroft
I think
Way.
in some cases you're right. I think others, the condominium associations, Canterbrooks and Pattons or Patton Ridges are different than your single-family subdivisions. So just to make that clarification.
What did we do there?
Those are both private.
There what?
They're both private.
for a good reason,
What was the reason?
because the town didn't want to maintain them.
Which is not necessarily a good reason if there's a problem on that road. I mean,
Well, that's why you go through site plan review and engineering and design so that they're built to, standards.
but if we have all these, bringing them up to town standard or some variation of town standard, we know immediately that they're gonna
But you can, what
survive.
Rick is saying is you can enforce that through site plan review.
Sure.
Right.
You don't have to abide
Yeah,
by
special
all of the
permit, yeah.
road requirements.
Yeah.
You build it thick enough or whatever you want.
I mean, like in this case, you're saying, leave the width the same as it is, because it's wide enough for 4 houses. Well, I get that. But the grade is, oof.
Okay.
Thank you.
You all set? Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, good luck. No, seriously.
Don't ride your bike in the winter.
That was the summertime.
I know.
Yeah.
Wait until the summer. Throttle up.
So next up is review of the OSFPD bylaw, and Patrick sent out today or yesterday copy of Wenham's flexible development bylaw. So I know at our last meeting, we discussed potentially scrapping the existing OSFPD and focusing maybe on a flexible bylaw or some variation thereof. So I don't know if everybody's had a chance to review that or not. If not, we can push it off to our next meeting. But I'd ask Patrick to just kind of prepare a quick 10,000-foot summary of that bylaw as it is. And, there's been one development, I believe, that's used it, which was Wenham Pines,
Pines, correct.
the old golf course on 1A.
Oh, they're using it, that new
Yeah.
one?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I've spoken with their planning coordinator there. She tells me that the brevity is certainly something that developers like. It's something that it ends up forcing the the planner and certainly the planning board to fill in the flesh on the bones. But that's not unlike, say, planned unit development or a lot of special permit projects which require a lot of detail. They do believe in Wenham that this is a very useful bylaw in that it allows you to, reflect the wetlands on properties, reflect site amenities, given topography, given outcropping, existing landscape, existing vegetation. They feel like it gives them good control in being able to make what they consider to be public amenities to an overall site remain as part of what they want the ultimate product of the development to be. I think that, you look at it, it's a pretty straightforward document, fairly limited in length. I think that it does a lot of what we wanted the OSFPD to do in reduced form, but I think it's got good clarity at the same time. I do think that we need to focus on the density part of it, because that's really the upshot of what makes it work or not.
And get rid of the affordable component, since we already have an inclusionary bylaw.
Yeah, since we do affordability in 3 different other places in the zoning, I'm not sure we need it here.
So Wenham has an inclusionary bylaw too, don't they?
Yes.
So they just, I don't know if it mirrors this, but, or is this different, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure how they work it with it.
Yeah, I guess I was questioning the density bonus, 50 maximum 50%. Didn't know if that, was enough or not.
Worked on.
I mean, it did work.
It
yes,
worked on Pines.
It did work on that. Well, we'll see in the end, but yeah, I mean,
So I would think that it would tend to favor, larger,
Yes.
much larger pieces of property, 10 acres and more.
Right.
So instead of, if the underlying zoning was 1 acre and you could only get 10, you could now get 15.
Right.
Plus, if you,
There is no size threshold in this law.
no.
no. So yeah, 15 would be your max.
On a 10-acre lot.
Yeah.
So
Well, yeah.
even if, but if you look at 11.18, 11.1.8, then
Yep.
for additional 10% over the required 40% set aside for contiguous open space. So, looks like
But
you
it
get,
says, the density bonus shall not exceed 50% of the basic maximum in that first paragraph, period.
so you're reading that excludes?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, did everybody else read it that way?
Yeah, I did. It's a maximum of, yeah.
Those others are cumulative up to
Got it.
50, I believe.
Okay, yeah, not in the aggregate to exceed. So, in theory, somebody could come and say, never mind, I'm not doing affordable, not affordable, I'm sorry, over 55, and I'm not setting aside an additional 10%, I'm just going for the 50%.
What is our goal with this right now? Just to,
To determine whether it's something we want to use as a template.
okay.
So that's a theoretical question, so if somebody just said, I don't want to do the over 55, I'm not setting aside more than 40%, I want to go to, on a theoretical 10-acre lot, I want the 50%. Or,
Well,
I would have no problem going with this as a template. There's a lot of details I would want to change. but-
I just want to get people's response to what's written here.
Yeah.
So I just get an understanding of how this works. Because it's like, for the 1 and 2, that's not going to add up to 50% unless you're,
Well, it does. It says each one can't exceed 25% of the basic max. So if you did the max of both of those, it'd be 50%.
so, well, let's say you didn't want to do any of the
Well,
over age
right.
55.
Right.
You'd have to do 50, you'd have no open space.
Well, then, no,
No,
well,
you can
then,
be
no,
all
because
open
again,
space.
that can only go up to 25%, so then you can only do 25%.
Then your total bonus would be 50 plus 25.
No,
No.
that's what I was the question.
No, I don't
read
think that's how I read it.
No, that was my original question.
Those two things are how you get
To
up to 50%. Each one worth 25. That's how I read it.
See, in the second sentence, under density bonus, the density bonus for the flexible development shall not, in the aggregate, exceed 50%. So I think what Brian's saying is correct, but, so I have a real, I would certainly not, one of these I might consider as the additional open space, but so we'd have to, this will end up being sort of like the senior housing bylaw.
Yeah.
Is you start layering in desirable attributes that you want to generate additional
Right.
bonus for. That's what we call social engineering. So I don't know. It certainly is wide open.
Yes. Oh, yeah, no, it is. I like that part of it. It's pretty concise.
I take heart with what Tom said at the last meeting, though, that we don't want this to be done at a small scale level where the set-aside open space is predominantly of use to the budding property owners as opposed to
Right.
being large enough to be valuable to the community as a whole. So maybe we should have, I mean, I'd be in favor of a 20 or 25 acre, 20 acre minimum size in order to enact this.
Yeah, but then I think we're getting away from what we're looking to do in general. I mean, I also don't, the other thing I didn't like in here was the 50-foot buffer, because now you're taking even more space out. You know, they want a 50-foot buffer all the way around it, so this is only applicable to large estates or large parcels.
Or golf courses.
Yeah, or golf courses, which, I mean, I don't know if any of the estates in this town will ever sell. But there are, as Tom said, there are 5 to 10 acre parcels that it could be useful on, but in this format, I don't think it works.
Well, well, like what Tom was saying was, it could work on a 5 acre parcel. You just don't have open space on that parcel. You buy it somewhere else.
Right.
You buy it.
Yeah, but that's a totally different bylaw. That's
Well,
a transferable
That was
development
the
right now.
Yeah, it is.
Development,
It
right.
is. It is. Yeah, it is.
It's worth considering, but
But-
it's a much more complicated.
Oh, I'm not saying it's not more complicated. You're absolutely right. I'm just wondering if it could be worked into something like this.
I think it needs to be, frankly.
Yeah, I think so, too.
I think it needs to be worked in some sort of way to get that open space, but not necessarily
In the development.
in the development. I understand Wenham Pines because it's out in a
Got
nice
it, got it.
pristine area, but there's that other, I don't even know what that is, the other one on Main Street in Wenham that's back there.
Oh, the other golf course you talking
No,
about?
there's,
the old one or the
there's like a little subdivision with a bunch of little houses back there, right? I can't think of what it's called, but it's like right across from Larch Row almost.
yeah.
Oh, that's, yeah. That's 20, there are 20 units in there,
Right.
24.
24 units in there and that's like, what, 3 acres? 4 acres?
Yeah, 4 or 5. Yeah.
When was it put there?
That was done.
That was late 2000s.
I mean, that's, and it's is it over age 55?
55 and over.
Yeah.
The thing is, I think in all the things that Tom was talking about, the idea of having a pool, contributing to a pool is the most flexible. Because you wouldn't want developers to say, all right, I'll pick up a density bonus here, and then my cousin Vinny has got 10 acres on the other side of town, and I'll donate that to the open space pool, when it's not really good land for use as open space. Whereas if you have him make a contribution into a pool, then when a piece of open space comes up that you really do want to buy, then that's when you exercise that money.
So, in addition to this, we'd have to craft some legislation that created that pool.
That's right.
I have an email that I got from town council. I had asked that she provide us with a transfer of development rights
Right.
bylaw. I think I may have sent that out. It's like 40-some pages. But I think it's a compilation
Oh,
of multiple policies from multiple communities that the state sort of raked together. And I think if you strategically look at the mechanics of what has to happen in setting up the fund and allowing for the holding of the cash over time, you can make it work. But it's heavy lifting at town meeting to make something like this happen.
No, sure. Especially here.
so, you probably did send it out. I don't remember, did other people see it? Because I've
When did you send it, Patrick?
I don't remember. I'll make sure and send it tomorrow
Okay.
as well.
it would be good to just look at it.
Sure.
And it may be too heavy and just say, we thought about it, we're going to gravitate to something else. Well, that answers the question when somebody says, well, have you considered anything else? And the answer is,
Yeah,
Well, but-
lots of things.
Yeah. But if it's something that makes sense to do,
right. Oh, I'm not against it, I'm just saying,
I don't want to not do it because it's, too hard to get through town meeting or whatever, but.
hey, you did the senior housing bylaw, and that only took 3 town meetings.
Okay.
I think people are going to be, just sort of in terms of the climate, are going to be more receptive to things that generate revenue. Because this town is going to be revenue starved for probably the next 5 years or longer.
Well, then the pool is a good thing. It says if we find a great piece of open space, we don't have to go to you with a
No,
tax,
I
thing.
think-
We have the money over here in the bank.
I think it's a good trade-off.
Right.
Density for,
Right.
funding a pool to buy open space. So, what do we do next?
Well, I guess we need to decide, do we want to consider 2 different bylaws? Well, obviously not for this town meeting, but 2 different bylaws, one transfer development right, and then one flexible? Is that where we're headed towards, or do we think we?
I think what we could
Can
do is
combine them.
if we created a pool, we could take any of the bylaws that we have, like the flexible open space or the state, and if we wanted to, we could say, we'll give you some kind of bonus on any of those properties if you contribute to the pool. So make little tiny changes in some of the existing zoning laws, and then create a new piece of enabling legislation which sets up the pool.
So how do we go about doing that?
Which
You
one?
have to amend all of the multiple.
Well, that, I meant the enabling legislation for the fund.
Well,
I mean, is that the
God.
selectmen that have to do that?
Yeah, it would have to go to town meeting and
Oh, yeah.
and you set up there's a word for it.
It's a revolving fund.
No,
No, they go to 0
it's a
every year.
restricted,
Right.
Yeah,
the
right.
town can't get their hands on it.
Right, it's not general fund,
Right.
but it's
Right.
restricted.
It gets
cash.
paid into.
Earmarked is what you mean.
Well, it's all of those.
More
things.
than that.
There's a word.
There's a
for it.
word for it, you're right.
There's a word for it. I can't. It's not sequestered. It's
Protected.
Restricted?
what? Yeah, it's all of those things, but that's not the right word.
Quarantine?
Okay.
What did she say?
It's like
Quarantine.
Yeah, there you go.
It's
Everyone's
like,
saying quarantine.
it's like the water enterprise fund. You know, it
Yeah,
goes.
yeah,
It,
yeah.
it goes in there, and it can only be used for
Water enterprise.
water improvements.
Open Space Enterprise Fund.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, I think we should move on from that for now, and then move on. So I know, Bill, you wanted to talk about another bylaw modification to
Actually, I have
mixed
two.
use, if you will.
The first is, I've read the town council's opinion on section 914, which is the groundwater protection overlay district. I don't want to revisit, just out of curiosity, how many acres was Canterbrook, is Canterbrook?
11-ish?
Well, it's.
So that doesn't meet 80, that doesn't
It was
meet 80.
originally 1411 developed, right?
Maybe you're right, something like that.
Yeah, it's 1411 developed,
And Patton Ridge,
4 acres.
how many?
Or 4.5, you're right.
4.5, as opposed to 14. Okay. So I would propose that we simply insert one sentence in section 9.1.4, which says, "A lot in this context equals a land on which sits one dwelling unit or one commercial building." I don't want to go backwards. I want to just think about that. That says, the purpose of groundwater protection is to ensure there's enough ground underneath what we build so that, and also what people put in the ground. I mean, this obviously has a lot to do with that. But the original, I've always taken the 80,000 square foot lot definition to be a minimum lot size for residential development. And that's why it was passed
It is.
originally.
It is. It
But by those standards, Patton Ridge and Canterbrook wouldn't have, they're in the GOP, right?
Well, but what you're not accounting for are these overlay or other bylaws that are above base zoning. You can have base zoning, right? If you had single-family homes, you'd have to do,
No, but the GOP, it's an overlay district, and it says regardless of what's underneath there,
Yep.
if you're in an area of fragile water, for want of better words, then you have to boost up your lot sizes to 80,000.
right, and the minimum was 80,000.
Right.
But what you're not taking into account are the.
I mean, I don't care whether they're
Right.
clustered or whether they're spread out.
Right, but the other part of that bylaw is the 15% impervious. If you exceed that, you have to get a special permit from the zoning board.
Right. I just think we should clarify this. It's very clear that.
I think it's very clear the way it is, and I think you're
It's not
not,
making
you're
it
not
more, it's
looking
not making it
at,
less clear. My sentence is.
you're not looking, well, you're making it more restrictive.
And that's,
So-
yeah, that's a little, before I could support that, I'd want to know what the impact of what you're proposing is on, what kind, show me the entire GPOD, and the.
The district, yeah.
And the class, I think it's class 2.
Zone 2.
Water protection, and what does that exclude, and what land is available? Because we went round and round on this for probably 3 years and had multiple legal opinions on this. And here's my biggest fear, Bill, and I know you really want to see single-family homes built.
But I'm not requiring that.
No, but you are, in a sense, because it becomes a one lot, one house, one commercial building.
Unless you have 20 acres. So you could put, so you had 20 acres, this would say you get 10 units. I'm not saying you have to put the 10 here, or they have to be all spread out.
Right, but
I'm saying you get 10 units because this is area where we're trying to minimize the impact on the groundwater.
there's
I'm not-
another, there's
I-
another,
I-
there's
I
another
wanna-
mechanism in there that does that. It's the impervious. That's the biggest thing. That's what you're limiting. It's just there's another way of doing it in there, which is pretty restrictive, 15%. It's fairly restrictive.
In terms of the soil pervious.
Yeah, the impervious,
You can't exceed 15% impervious.
unless you get a special permit from the
Right, no, I
zoning
got
board,
it.
yeah.
I just-
And that includes, that's your footprints, your houses, your sidewalks, your roads. And they,
But then why
They
even
struggled to
have
meet
the
that.
80? Why even have the 80?
because
Why was
that's,
the 80
that,
put
it's,
in
it's
there?
serving two purposes. 80 is for a normal lot, right? Even in a 1 acre zone or a half acre zone, it's still 80, so you're limiting it that way.
Well, originally, this whole, and Peter, you can
Well-
attest to it, and
Peter
Peter Britton was
Peter
in
Britton
here
said it,
last
too.
time, and I think he alluded to it. It was created 30 years ago because under the, it was thought at the time, it was going to unburden the town's water infrastructure. So, and the thought was, well, you needed 2 acres because you want to be pumping on, 1 acre, and you want to be septic on another acre. You wanted some
A well
separa-
and a septic,
You wanted a separation between well and wastewater. That's where that 80,000 came from, and it was the mistaken belief that that was, that it would lessen the cost and lessen the burden on pumping and the aquifer. Well, 20 years later, it's all coming out of the same aquifer, so it's really not saving water. Am I wrong?
No.
Okay, so that's the genesis of that 80,000 square feet. It was totally arbitrary, just to say, okay, it's got to be 80,000 feet. So, and then just, putting one building on that 80,000 square feet, I just think, I haven't got my head wrapped around it yet. My concern is it's going to limit development too much. So,
And that bylaw is a template from the state, and lots of towns,
oh, it came right from the
municipalities use
state.
it. It's verbatim except for the size of the lot, but it's,
I mean, I think this is a very interesting discussion, and this is something that's going to have to go on at town meeting and, for the next several years is, and I feel like a broken record, and, people I'm sure are getting tired of listening to this, but 85% of our land in this town is protected in some fashion, either permanently or it has restrictions on it, leaving 15%, and that doesn't count for that 15% that already has houses or short structures on it. So I don't know what that number is, because I haven't subtracted out all those houses, but maybe it's 7-8% that we can actually build something different on. 97% of our revenues come from residential development now. We're in serious financial condition that people don't recognize yet. We've got $30 million of capital expenses coming up over the next 10 years. We've got a school budget it's going to be expanding and already is expanding, that if it goes to that 13%, it's going to drive us into override. So we're going to be in override territory. They aren't even funding their retirement account. That's $60 million that falls on the two towns for their retirement benefits. We got to figure out how to afford to provide town services, schools, fire, police, DPW. So
Trash pickup?
trash pickup, one of your favorite topics. So I'm really scared. I really am of what's coming for the people in this town. So I really want to be real careful about how we restrict the potential for development. I want to protect open space. I think the OSFPD version, whatever it is a great idea, and it will be a good piece, but we've got to figure out how to maximize what we've got left until we find another alternative. So, as I said, I haven't wrapped my head around it. I think it's a good discussion to have in this whole thing, but I'd still want to know how that impacts, the pieces of land and potential development. So I'm the skunk at the garden party here. But you see where I'm coming from.
yeah, no,
Absolutely.
I'm not, yes, no, I mean, I completely agree with all of that. I just got, when I got in back on the board here and looked at the 80,000 and then looked at Canterbrook and Patton Ridge, I said, what goes here?
So let's theoretically,
I didn't hear you last.
So what goes here?
What goes here?
Okay.
They're what?
These places don't.
He was wondering how that happened. given
How
it-
that happens, they have nowhere near 80,000 square feet per unit. And if you
Well,
really were
Right,
trying
well,
to.
and that's where you're mistaken, because it never says per unit anywhere in that bylaw.
Lot. Yeah, but
Well,
that's the, go
right.
Google lot.
No, Bill, I
Go
do it
Google
all the
lot,
time.
And 90% of the responses are a piece of land on which you put a single dwelling unit.
No,
I feel like this
Yes,
is.
it is. I'll
I
give
feel
you the
like this
count.
is deja vu all over
But
again.
again, we've adopted bylaws in this town that allow you to do more than a single house on a lot. That's a given. People have voted for it for a long time. It is what it is.
Talk to the finance committee. If you want to save the tax rate, there are only two things to do. Make sure, try and get as much commercial development in here as you can, as opposed to residential. And the second way is try and make sure that all the development occurs on the most upper, high-income segment you possibly can.
That's
They know
fine,
the math too.
but
That's, if your goal is to keep the tax rate, to allow the town to spend what it wants, and keep the tax rate in check, there's only two ways of doing it. It's mathematics.
Well, I respect your point of view. I just have an opposite one. You want to go high end. I want to go density that makes it not high end, that makes it, maybe we can buy something in the $500 or $600 or $700,000 range.
That won't help the tax rate.
Or there needs to be a
Sure
mix.
will.
There needs to
No,
be a
no,
there needs to be a
You
mix.
have to be, given the towns, you have to be well above 600,000 now to have any positive effect.
You're assuming kids.
I'm assuming average, I'm assuming 0.4 kids. Which takes us to another point. Patrick, have we figured out whether we can do our study on school attendance in newly purchased houses?
I've asked the superintendent. I haven't gotten a response
Okay.
yet.
I mean, I'm prepared to go anyway on this, depending on what he says. Okay?
I just want to look at options. I understand we want to minimize costs to the extent we possibly can. And I've, talked to Dave Wanger, Chairman, and Nick Tenson of the Finance Committee, and I know Darcy Dale is very much interested in looking at commercial development. However, we only have, you saw what happened.
I understand there is a limited.
You saw Rick minced and diced at the neighborhood meeting. Now, this is going to add, if it gets built, $5 million to the tax base. So, and it's transit-oriented development in exactly the right place.
I missed
20
what you said. What do you mean?
Willow Street.
Willow Street.
Willow Street.
Okay.
You better hope there are no kids in those apartments. Otherwise, I mean, hate to say that, of course, but otherwise it's
But
not gonna come
the problem
close to
is,
paying for itself.
we're in a world, and we can't try to take this town out of the world. And we need diversity in this town, and it's part of life, and we have to deal with that. And, if you want to, I don't want to live in a town that has nothing but high-end value homes. I don't want to be around a town like that. It just,
We don't live there now.
but you want to make it that way.
Well, we
We'll
kind of.
never even come close to making it that way.
Well, that,
The average house value in Manchester is twice what it is here, and that's why their tax rate is half of what ours is.
So the same true in Edgartown.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
But-
tax rate
but
is
that's-
about $5 per thousand.
If you want an override vote, if you want to spend more, I think we have to be really wary of the tax rate. You said it yourself.
We need coastline. That's what we need.
Yeah, we
We
need
need what?
coastline.
we need industry, we need a good
Yeah.
factory.
They're saying 10 years.
Don't you have a factory?
Yeah, I mean, this is, this is a wonderful argument to have, and it's gonna get played out. And this is why I've been on the planning board for so long, because this is where the rubber meets the road. It's all well and good, but this is what changes
All right,
You know, a lot of people have said over the years, more commercial, great. Just
Where?
Where?
Every time we try, it gets shot down.
Where?
Where you live. The part that is commercial, you live on it, and several other families do, and they have it.
Well, but,
You haven't been bought out.
but there's nothing economic about buying 8 houses at $500,000-$600,000 or more.
Yeah.
Knocking those down and building what? What are you gonna let them build?
Exactly. So, I mean, it's kind of a fallacy.
A corporate office, transit-oriented corporate office.
Yeah. Well, you know, if we could put a 10.
Right, Laura?
Well, there's two full floors, there's 2 full floors of beautiful new office space. It's completely empty right now.
Employees.
2 doors down.
Transit-oriented corporate office.
Yeah, a 10-story development. You know, that's all we need. You know, just one big tower.
Up on the hill.
All right, so let me go on to my, I'm not doing well so
That was
far.
a segue for you. I did that on purpose.
Let me go on to my second one, which is poor Rick was between a rock and a hard place at this meeting last week of Willow Street residents. And I was surprised that he handled himself very well. He was not representing the board. I was representing the board. He was representing the HDC. So he was getting pummeled. And, you know, what these people said was, this is totally more dense than anything that's here. We don't like it. And I don't think it was NIMBYism. They would be totally open to, you know, a little townhouse development, a commercial development on that piece of land. But, you know, you have to sympathize with them, 18 units. There's a lot of density.
I disagree. Had we put up a 3-story commercial building, the reaction would have been exactly the same. I can almost guarantee you it would have been
Well,
exactly
you might have had as much traffic. The 3 stories was very important.
That's why I went.
Three stories is very important because everything else is 2. Okay, so they've sent me a bunch of emails. They've sent me what they really would say is just change one line in section 312, which is instead of having 2 or more, have a maximum of 2. That's it.
Of what? Of 2 what?
2 apartment units on top of a commercial
2
development.
apartment units per what?
What?
What's it tied to? What's the ratio?
Just 2.
Well, there's a couple of ways to cut it. The way the original law was 1, right? 1 unit on top of a commercial project.
Well, it wasn't even on top of, but it was.
It was second story.
The only reason that 1 unit was allowed was because a single family is allowed in that zone as well. So the zoning board had always allowed an apartment with a commercial space as well.
Yeah, and there were, according to several people I know who work down there were several commercial owners who said, gee, it would really be helpful if I could put a unit or 2 up there.
Yep.
Okay, so the neighborhood is totally in favor of that. They say, why don't we just say 2 or maybe 3 units on top of a mixed use, on top of a commercial development. That's what mixed use means down there. It doesn't mean 1 story of commercial and 3 stories or 2 stories of apartments. It's 1, 2, or 3, 4 units on top of a commercial development.
Right. So what do you think the impact would be on any potential development in the downtown? New development?
I mean, look,
Sure.
if you allow unlimited development of anything, you're always going to get more responses to an RFP than if you put constraints on it.
Well, again, stop with the unlimited. I don't want to hear that again. It's not unlimited. That is a complete fallacy.
Limited insofar
Complete
as you
fallacy.
can fit it within a 3-story box that's 3
No,
stories
that's not true though. Again, that's not true.
So-
There's certain properties downtown you can't do anything with because there's no land on them and there's no septic. There are a few properties downtown that, yeah, you can build 18 units, or you can build 10 units or 5 units.
A lot of the commercial developments
Because there's-
have their septic pumped, but you can't
Right.
do that with.
But you can't
with
expand. You can't
dental.
expand those.
So,
I'm telling you, we are elected officials.
I get it.
We zoned the downtown, and the downtown residents, as a best I can judge from the group, okay, really didn't like that development, and they would be much happier with commercial development with just a couple residential units on top.
Again,
let me ask the question. So let's pretend Dodge Tree property, you know, we could apply that to the Dodge, and I'm going to say it's 2 acres for them. So somebody wants to develop that property. So using what you've described as 1 or 2 units, they could develop a 20,000 square foot commercial facility and they could have
2 units.
2 units.
2 units on top.
You think
So I have
that-
another proposal, which the town, which the residents, they think it's too loose. But my restriction would be same amount of square footage of residential as commercial. No more square footage of residential than commercial on top of the commercial. So that would allow you to put, in your 20,000 square foot factory or whatever it is that's going in on Dodge Street, that would allow you to put a second floor of 20,000 square feet. That's a lot of residential. But it could only be 2 stories,
Well, that's where, yeah.
right? And when I proposed that, in this case, if you had the same footprint of Willow Street, which was, 6,000 square, 5,000 square feet.
7, 8.
You could have put 5,000 square feet of apartments on top of that, if you had devoted the whole first floor to commercial. That would give you
equate to probably
7 or 8 apartments.
Yeah, probably 5 to 7. I get it. I'd actually be more inclined to put a limit on the number of units, because then whoever's developing it could determine how they wanted to configure this, as opposed to, 2, which, all due respect, not going to fly. And the square footage, we're moving in the right direction, but I'd like to be thinking, this is what we did with the senior housing bylaw, because we had the same, we limited the total number town-wide to 150, I believe, to 50, no more than 50 in any given year. They had to be, a certain distance from each other. So there were parameters that, made sure there wasn't the density and the speed with which this stuff was being developed to try and, lessen the impact.
The problem with number is then you get into the issue of, if it's a big development, like you want to do on Dodge, 2 units is nothing. So in the case of a 20,000 square foot Dodge, let's say first floor factory, you could actually build a 2-story factory, and then you could add a 3rd floor of apartments,
Well,
or 2 stories of commercial.
no factories are going to occur there because the
Commercial.
bylaw doesn't.
No, I'm relying on Laura to bring her
Well, and that's-
high-tech factory
and that's its own
company
district
into
as
town.
well.
Yeah. So I think this is, I'd definitely love to have this discussion so that we, it's just funny, and it's not funny, I mean that in a sense of irony, that we went through this with Canterbrook, Sharon Road. This, as I said at that meeting, we'd have this room packed with 50 people in here, very angry people, that the planning board was even considering having this discussion about a special permit, because, quite rightly, they were concerned about traffic, parking, drainage, and septic, and lighting and noise. And the board as a whole, Peter, I, Brian, were you part of it?
Towards the end.
Yeah.
Toward the end.
Jeff.
I mean, it was nasty. It was as much or worse than what you saw when we were together. So I'm not making light of this, but every time we're required to make a tough decision, we're the bad guys. So I'm just saying to you, Bill, I don't want good, thoughtful zoning to be undermined by the neighbors in an uproar.
Here's the, it's a good question, but here's the experiment that we don't have. Okay, all of these developments where the neighbors have come out have involved significant densification relative to what was there. So what we don't have to make a fair comparison is what if what if Tom Ford came into Canterbrook and he said, I'm going to do just a nice development of 7 or 8, colonial houses on 1 acre, 2 acre lots. And my guess would have been the opposition in the neighborhood might still have been a little bit there. Why can't we just have, but nobody liked the stables. I think, my guess is the opposition would have been, a tiny fraction of what actually happened.
Yeah. And so.
But we don't, unfortunately, we don't have a laboratory here where we can run this experiment.
Right. So, but here goes back to my economic argument. So we build $7 or $8 million homes, on that site. So we've got $8 million added to the tax base. Canterbrook is adding $16 million to the tax base with no kids in the school system and no cost
Well,
to the
you
town.
don't know about the kids, and it's not 16, it's 18.
No, it's 55.
You do.
and over, right?
It's a 55.
So you can't have kids
You-
under 18 there.
You're thrown
so,
out.
So no, there's no kids.
Can't bring your 17-year-old in there
No,
when you're 55?
No.
Yeah, I'm
There's-
over
there's
55.
No kids under 18. I
no
believe.
kids under 18.
No kids, oh, it's kids under 18, okay.
So that's my economic argument. From my perspective, and I'm speaking only for myself, you love the big mega buildings. I
I
love
don't.
this because you get density and you get revenue and you get no costs. So,
Yeah, but if you've built, let's say, $1.25 million, and you built, six, you're right, six, you get $9 million of value, but you're not gonna
You're getting a bunch of kids.
have that many. I
Oh,
think
of course. When it's your style building, you don't get very many kids.
And you're gonna get a roadway that you're gonna have to maintain for
That's right.
in perpetuity and plow and pick up their garbage.
You can have 2 kids per house or whatever it is.
No, but you wonder
using your
why
math,
the
that's
neighbors.
$32,000 a year.
You wonder
per-
why the neighbors were upset. It's because you're proposing something very, very different. That's much
Absolutely.
Well, that's exactly right.
absolutely, you're absolutely right. That's why it took 3 town meetings to get passed. But it did pass.
Well, and what ended up happening was, the original developer wanted 43 units.
Yeah.
It came down to 23 units in the end.
Oh, given what it is, I think it looks pretty darn good.
It's not bad. It's
not
better than
bad.
it was going to be.
I'm not, I think the site plan review I wasn't part of it, but it seems to have been done really, really, really well.
Yeah, it's not even landscaped yet, so it's going to be a huge improvement once that's
So
done.
anyway, I think, get back to your original discussion, because we've gotten really on traffic. I think we need to come up with something that's better than 2. We
it's
talked
just
about,
2 or more.
yeah, something, and I'd like to hear from other people, a numerical limit might be something that works.
Yeah, or FAR, and we tossed
Floor
that
area
around with
ratio,
Willow Street Overlay District.
Which is sort of getting towards what you're just,
With the square foot.
yeah, you're describing, and that's what we actually talked about before Christmas, and I thought you were gonna sort of consider that and maybe come back with a specific,
But the thing is, the Finance Committee, everybody really wants to encourage commercial development.
Yeah,
oh, I
that's-
get it.
Well, no, it's not necessarily true.
Residential
No.
things should be, icing on the cake, an afterthought. It shouldn't be the primary purpose of the development.
I don't know where you're coming up with that.
I never heard that one
Bill,
here.
I agree with you
Read the-
100%. Only one problem. There's no commercial space other than downtown. In the downtown, there's one piece of property that I know of, the Dodge Tree, we'll call it that piece, that isn't for sale. Nobody wants, and there's no buyers. So there's that. There's the dump that's under study now, right?
We know not
Going
much
to
can be built
be-
there, yeah.
Maybe we can get.
There's that potential, and as far as, there's just nothing else, unless you start tearing down homes, and there's no value in tearing down homes, because you'll get no economic out, you
Right,
can't build anything that would be,
Right, and again, what everybody's building now are residential units, which we need more of. We don't need more second-floor office space that doesn't rent, which we're seeing it downtown right now at 227 Willow. There's 2 full floors there's 10,000, 15,000
I
feet of.
understand, but Willow Street
Oh, it's empty.
gives us effectively 0 commercial.
Right.
Right, it's a-
But what's the
it's a
difference? But you got
residential
18 units.
And, the Finance Committee got this group together because they're very upset about it too. They say, well, this is just a lot of inexpensive residential stuff that's not going to help the tax base.
I'm
Who
sorry,
said
I missed that part.
Finance Committee was all in favor of that development.
Willow Street?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Dave Wanger.
Oh, he's absolutely in favor of it.
He absolutely was.
Absolutely. Every time
It
he's
was.
gotten up and spoken, he said, this is great, because he recognizes the economic value.
If, I would agree more with you if commercial and residential were at different rates, but they're not.
No, we don't want to go down that
If-
path.
Well,
So-
okay then, so,
No, the Finance Committee is 100% behind that project. I've met with them numerous times, they're fully briefed, and they look at it as a good project in a good place. I wish I had said that at the meeting. I'm proud of what the HDC has done. It's taken 8 years to make it happen, and a lot of headaches, and we've done a really good job, and I hope to hell somebody bids on it. So,
no,
What is its status?
I mean, it's
Is it-
RFP's out, so.
RFP, okay. And how long?
it's
4
We have
months?
like,
March 20th, our bids are due.
Okay. Very interesting.
no, I mean, what I've seen, and again, I'm just speaking it from this as an observer of what happened over the last few years was, obviously we had Harbor Light coming in and said they could build 20 units of senior there in 2 floors. It was almost all residential, very little commercial.
One little
And-
piece.
Yeah, and the neighbors generally
We're okay.
were okay with it. Only difference
It's
Only difference is
15
that,
feet.
is that 3rd floor. That was it, really, when you really break it down. So it's not the residential piece,
How many units was Harbor Light going to do?
20.
20, same size.
20 senior, yeah, it's essentially the same size, yeah.
Yeah, well, and I think it was Miss Svensson, because I was trying to get at that, I said, so what's the difference? And we finally got, it's the 3rd floor. That's the thing that they really don't like, is the 3rd floor. Well, in a mixed use, it has to be there because 9 units, first floor commercial, next floor 9 units, wouldn't make that fly. That's why I'm resisting that, 2 units, just wouldn't work. So it had to go to a 2nd story to get to 18 units to make it economically viable. So,
No, if you just stuck with the 2nd floor and had 9 units, you probably would have gotten through the neighborhood a lot better.
Well, maybe, but it wouldn't have been a viable.
it wouldn't be
have been
economically viable.
Nobody would do it.
No, it wouldn't have. No, it wouldn't have. It's not,
Well, it
it's
depends on
not
what
a,
you
it's
paid
not a
for the
super
land.
great,
It depends on what you paid for the land. Would it be economically viable? Sure.
No.
Would it? Yes, there'd be a land residual after you built 9 units, right? If I gave you the land for free,
Well-
you couldn't make money off of 9 units?
It's not free, though.
right.
I know, so that means you probably overpaid for it.
No.
Because we didn't get it for free?
No, you could, there would be, it's,
We had it appraised and we bought it, well, Mac wanted $1 million for the property. We paid him $600,000.
Right. It's been
That was
appraised at
based on-
over
That was
900.
based on appraisals of the value of the land at the time.
okay. So the answer is if you get a lot of RFPs, that's your asking price, that's what it's worth. If you don't get any, then you overpaid.
Exactly.
Okay.
Well, or you're underbuilding.
Well, you want to build a 4th story.
Well, no,
That's my biggest fear is because it's not a rich project for a developer. They're not going to make a lot of money on this.
Not at $1 million, nope.
not even at 600,
Well, they make a lot more money.
some.
So,
not
we'll
that
see.
much.
Did you have a third thing?
No, those are the 2.
Okay.
So what are we going to do about changing 3.1.2? You don't want to, do you want to do any change for the spring?
I'd like to, I think.
Square
I'm not
footage?
opposed to a change.
No,
I just
I-
think it needs to be
Thought out.
just slightly more reasonable than what you're proposing here.
Could you come back with and do a couple of options, like a floor area ratio and maybe a numeric limit?
Okay. Patrick,
And
what's our limit
so-
on? We could file for a zoning bylaw change, not say what it is, and if we couldn't reach an agreement in the next couple of weeks, then we just pull it?
Yeah, you could put in an article that's loosely worded to say that the planning board seeks an amendment to
Whatever.
a citation.
Section 3, something
Yeah.
like
Right.
that, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Everything's in section 3. You want to do that? And
I mean,
then
again,
if we can, we'll look at a couple proposals in the next, I'll draft some things up. We'll look at a couple proposals at the next meeting. If we can agree on something, then we'll fill out the
And could
warrant.
you,
If we can't, then we'll pull it.
yeah, and use the Willow Street sort of site as the sort of your template when you apply your forms, just so we have a point of reference.
Absolutely, sure.
Because we know what the current one would have allowed. What would the new ones potentially allow? So we can talk about something that,
Yeah, and I had done a couple years ago when we were talking about this, floor area ratio based on, this was for Willow Street Overlay District, so I took all the buildings in that district, along with a couple other larger buildings, like the Timeless Interiors Building on Railroad Ave, and looked at what their FARs are currently as built out. And then I did, so I had that from a couple years ago, and I did another one in the last couple days, looking at mainly Railroad Ave and took 5963 Willow as well as proposed, or as permitted, and just to see where
Sure,
they
the FAR
are.
on that project is probably a little less than a half, right?
0.56, when you count the front building too.
Yeah, 0.56.
But the one thing I've noticed is, you get the smaller lots, the 5,000, 3,000 foot lots that are downtown on Railroad Ave, and you've got some of them that have, over a 1 FAR, some that are, 0.75, 0.85. So I guess my point is that
I'm not, I don't think I ever objected to the FAR of Willow Street. It's the residential commercial split. And I think that was a lot of the neighborhood opposition too.
it's the height.
What?
It's all the height.
Well,
It's the height.
Yeah, that's what I heard.
I mean, this is exactly what everybody is advocating, transit-oriented development. Get people out of their goddamn cars, put them on public transportation, and invigorate the downtown. I get the neighbors are upset. They'll get over it. I guarantee you, in 5 years, when we're supersizing the trees and the trees are grown up, it'll all be forgotten.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure the people around the 300 Willow, years ago, when that was done, 7 giant townhouses went in, the people right around there weren't happy either, but.
actually, I was on the board when 7 Willow went through, and there wasn't as much opposition as you would expect.
No, there wasn't.
Different time.
What?
There wasn't any.
It wasn't, and
Different time,
it
yeah.
was like, okay, these are just like the houses that are down there now, except they're kind of, clustered. And, it's not a big change. And they bought it, and the houses have held their value, but that was a lot.
Were you on the board when Dick Gordeau did 203 Willow?
Yeah.
What about that? Was there much?
I don't think there was any opposition at all.
Oh, bring back those times.
Yeah.
What was 203 Willow? Which was that?
Willowdale. So there's right next to my house.
Okay. Oh, okay, yeah,
Yeah,
right.
he had it on all those commercial units in the
Yeah.
back.
Yeah.
Right. They're out of sight.
Well, for some, yeah.
Yeah, most of it's out of sight. You drive in there and you don't realize it's there from the street.
So if you'd done the townhouses, it was about the same, townhouses are about
And they're
an
also-
acre of land.
Yeah, it was about an acre. It's about an
You'd
acre.
done, I don't know how many units are there, 8,
Two or
something like?
7.
7?
They're outside
You'd done
the
that,
commercial district.
I don't think you would have had any opposition to that at all.
That's
There wasn't any 20 years
a
ago.
big factor.
Well, right, it is.
Then we're
It is a
adding more
fact, you're right.
kids to the school system.
I don't think there are many kids from Willowdale. Who knows, we haven't done our
Bill,
study.
you can't have it both ways.
We haven't done our study.
I met a couple, at one of our,
It was all
things-
before my time.
where they had their kid and their kid's kid living there in one of those townhouses.
Yeah, technically, we couldn't have done that. It's not allowed.
So, but that's $6 million of rateable value.
So,
Same as Willow Street.
Okay,
I don't think there would have been any opposition to it.
okay, well, again,
I got news for you, Bill. There would have been.
Yeah.
nowadays,
wasn't.
nowadays, there probably.
There
would've been.
wasn't.
Yeah, that was,
It's opposition to everything now.
that was 35 years ago. So, anyway, can we move on?
We can move on. Housing production plan?
All right. As I think I'd mentioned to you last time, or maybe the time before, the planning board has approved the housing production plan. I then needed to have the Board of Selectmen approve it. They wanted the Hamilton Affordable Housing Trust to approve it first. So as they were doing that, they had a number of comments, and some of them are consistent with what the planning board's comments were. So I have had the consultant make those changes. You'll see those requests right after number 4, and then you'll see the citation or the page and the portion of the page where the change got made. I've made sure that they have all taken place. You'll notice those are in the document. One of them has a formatting issue that I'd like to have them change, but the document did have the added changes made to it.
Their primary concern was the recommendations in terms of site-specific strategies, wasn't that?
Right.
That's, they don't.
Yeah, there's all these caveats they put in.
Right. It was basically to say that, you know, a really difficult site needs to have some narrative basically saying that. And another site, like, say, for instance, Gordon Conwell, that has 20 acres that, you know, is eminently more developable, needs to reflect that narrative as well. So that's what I added into the text through the consultant's edits.
I got lost. What?
So if we approve this, this
Where
goes
did
back
he
to the
add something?
Affordable Housing Trust.
That's all he,
It goes back to
Filled out
the
here.
Affordable Housing Trust. They make
What was
their
added
vote
in
and
the-
their
in the text.
recommendation
Where it
to
was.
the Board of Selectmen. The Board of Selectmen then have to vote, and if they vote positively, it then allows us to submit the housing production plan to the Department of Housing and Communities and Development, who will certify it.
This is really the Affordable Housing Trust document.
it is.
It is, however, the way that the requirement is set up for housing production plans, the state requires the local planning board and the Board of Selectmen or City Council to
I was speaking
approve.
rhetorically.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe not everyone on TV would know that.
That's true. My humor is very subtle and dry.
Yeah.
And didn't project. I have no idea what you said.
That's all right.
We don't need to, yeah, it's okay. Is everybody okay with it?
Yes.
Can I just
Yeah.
make a point? Because
Can you-
my name is Marnie Crouch.
Come sit up.
Yeah, please up to the microphone, please.
Marnie Crouch, and I am on the Affordable Housing Trust. And my recollection of the comments made by the members of the trust at that meeting were that the specific projects or proposed projects that were identified were not necessarily ones that were endorsed. They were just examples.
Yep.
And I don't know that the edits reflect that. In other words, these are examples of developments that could happen, but there might well be language that there are other sites or other developments as yet unknown that the town at some point could endorse. So I think that the sense of that might not be conveyed by these specific edits. In other words, the consultants here, the planners, they set forth certain examples. But I think that the trust wanted to make sure that at no point was it endorsing any of those, because they're speculative at this point. So I don't know that the edits truly convey that. I mean, certainly that they're possible, but it's the trust isn't endorsing any at this time because we don't have any specific details. So to the extent that the production plan inferentially suggests that these are the only things that are on the table.
That's not what it says, though.
No, it isn't. But I'm trying to, and I wasn't one of the members that actually took this position. I'm just conveying what others thought. And I think, though, to be fair, you could have a caveat that these are examples only. There are other developments that as yet unknown, and again, the edits are correct that say the Winthrop School does pose significant detail. So I'm not saying the edits are wrong. I just add, if you wanted to adhere to what the other members of the Affordable Housing Trust were stating, you might have a little broader language, introductory language, when those developments were referenced.
One of the important things to remember as part of the process for preparing the housing production plan is that the consultants work with a number of residents in Hamilton, and they basically had the input from those residents of potential project areas that were nothing more than potentials.
Right, and I think,
and that's what is embodied in the document.
And I think that's absolutely true, but I think what you just said as a prefatory paragraph would solve the problem.
Yeah.
What you just said, these are the things that the members of the community have identified, but they're just representative. And of course, the Winthrop School is I think the key example, because I remember reading, everybody think that's a great site, it would be perfect, but it's also probably the one proposed development site that poses the biggest, would have the biggest cost. Right. And would involve the town of Wenham. I mean, it would have a lot of legal and other problems before it even got off the ground.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. We good? Entertain a motion.
I don't have it in front of me, so I'm not going to do it.
Want to walk it over to you?
Yeah, definitely. Go up for it.
I make a motion the planning board adopt and endorse the Town of Hamilton production housing plan in its current form.
Was there a date? Was there a date on this?
Yeah, 209, as of,
Well, this still says November 27th of 19, but.
well, it goes from 2019 to 2024.
Well, but on the bottom.
That's the.
Yeah. So
Oh, I thought you didn't have a copy.
I said I didn't say I had this, never mind. I don't have a copy of what the agenda said.
Maybe we can just say the
There is no actual date. on this
latest
draft,
plan presented. Well, it does say revised on the 27th,
other
of
than
November
yeah,
27th.
other than November.
But as presented at our meeting tonight.
As of,
yeah.
presented as of February 4th.
Right, presented to the
Yeah.
planning board.
Yeah.
As of February 4th,
As of February
2020.
4th.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous? Thank you. Minutes. 21st. on the minutes? I'll make a motion that we approve the January 21st, 2020 minutes as presented.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Unanimous? Any other reports, topics, discussions?
Let's see. The Community Preservation Committee, which administers the CPA funds on behalf of the town, needs a representative liaison from this board. So Jay Butler asked me to make this announcement tonight and see if a member would like to be on that committee.
Yeah, because Janelle was the previous liaison.
Right.
What's involved with the liaison?
You go to their meetings, they're typically once a month. They evaluate applications, eligibility applications, then actual funding applications for use of CPA funds for affordable housing, open space, preservation, and recreation.
I was on it for probably 3-4 years. And then Ed took it over, and he's no longer here.
Yeah.
Anybody have an appetite for that?
If I stay on the board, I will probably
Have you
to
decided
do
yet?
that. I haven't taken this decision.
Okay. There's going to be some turnover, or maybe. Laura's running. Rick, you're running.
Yeah, I'm running.
You're running.
Yeah. And I may be running.
You may run.
Yeah.
Okay,
I
good.
thought your wife said you weren't going to run.
Right.
Well, she might not be right.
Oh, don't tell her that.
Just don't tell her
That's a
that.
bold statement.
No.
Cut that from the video.
Years of marriage.
We're duking it out.
Huh?
Maybe after 50 years of marriage.
Yeah.
She thinks I ought to stay home, but. Anyone else running? Do we know? No
I don't
one's
know.
pulled papers.
I don't know.
Nobody else that I know of. Unless someone has a secret burning desire to be on that committee.
Maybe things will change after the election.
Didn't the planning board also have a representative to the Affordable Housing Trust too?
At some point we did.
I know that Matt Tobine was.
Years ago,
You know,
yeah.
when he was on the board.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Well, so, I mean, what do we do for the time being? I mean, do you want to do it for the time being, and then, I mean, it's only, what,
2 weeks?
one or two more meetings? Yeah. And then, well, you'll
What, to
know,
go to the
you'll know,
Affordable Housing
no, the CPC.
Sure, if you want me to.
Does it have to be a consistent person?
Yes.
They need to have voting members who have the ability to be there and allow them to reach their quorum and make their decisions. You know, when the real crunch time is when they're preparing the applications, reviewing them for a town meeting.
Could our open space pool
I
be
can't
nested
commit to another thing
somehow
right
within the
at this
CPC?
moment.
Say that again, please?
He's the chairman.
Our, open space revolving fund, whatever we want to call it, somehow be a sub-part of the community preservation group?
What open space fund?
If we go that direction.
Oh, if we go that way, okay.
Thing that I
Hypothetical.
proposed, the thing we're thinking about.
Shouldn't be, because that can go to anywhere.
No, that's why I'm asking.
Yeah, no.
4 categories, and it just becomes a mess.
Open space is only one.
Right.
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
I make a motion, we adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Tell Jay.